Namaskar and welcome to World Today. Today is Holi, the festival of colors. So here's wishing all of you a happy Holi filled with every color of the rainbow and with every significance, tradition and blessing associated with this festival, which is celebrated across India and in many parts of the world. We'll be focusing on the growing protests and tensions building up in Myanmar, the international condemnation against the military action there. My name is Mark Lynn. Let's begin with the headlines. Holi, the festival of colors, is celebrated today in India and many parts of the world. Images of different colors and revelry of Holi are emerging from different parts of the country. President, Vice President and Prime Minister greet the nation on the occasion. US Vice President Kamala Harris also extends greetings on Holi. The stern of a huge container ship that has been wedged across the Suez Canal for almost a week has been freed from the shoreline. The world has heaved a sigh of relief. Killing of more than 100 anti-coup protesters in Myanmar has drawn global outrage. Defense ministers of 12 nations condemn military violence in Myanmar. US President Joe Biden says the situation in Myanmar is absolutely outrageous after security forces had opened fire at a funeral service on Sunday. India's massive global outreach Vaccine Maitri initiative reaches out to the Indo-Pacific. Consignment of made-in-India COVID-19 vaccines arrive in Fiji. Massive fire breaks out at Indonesia state oil company Pertamina's refinery, injuring 5 and leading to the evacuation of almost 950 residents nearby. Large explosion also engulfs the refinery's storage tanks. No impact felt on the processing plant, and operations expected to be restored in 4 to 5 days. Lewis Hamilton, chasing a record 8th title, wins the Formula One season opener in Bahrain. 23-race F1 season action resumes after a 3-week break before the next Grand Prix at Imola. Several hundred Jewish worshippers wearing face masks pray at the Western Wall to mark the priestly blessing during Passover, an event usually attended by thousands. The prayer, which took place under COVID-19 restrictions, is split into 2 separate events this year to allow for more people to attend. Let's begin with the big news. Well, Holi, the festival of colors, is celebrated today in India and many parts of the world, and images of different colors of revelry of Holi are emerging from different parts of India as well. We know President Ramnath Kovind, Vice President Venkaiah Naidu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi have greeted the nation on the occasion. These are visuals of Holi celebrations from different parts of the country. A festival marking the festival of colors, the change of season, the victory of good over evil, the dawn of a new beginning. US Vice President Kamala Harris has greeted the people on the occasion of Holi. Holi, as we said, is the festival of colors. That's what she says. It's being celebrated today. In a tweet, Kamala Harris says, "Happy Holi. Holi is best known for vibrant colors that are tossed at friends and loved ones. Full of joy, Holi is all about positivity, setting aside our differences and coming together, a message that's being embodied by communities across the world during these tough times." Well, the US State Department as well has extended Holi greetings. The State Department tweeted saying, "Happy Holi. We wish all of those who are celebrating a happy and colorful time filled with love and peace. May this time bring you all goodness and prosperity." The Festival of Colors was also celebrated at the Nepal Embassy in Delhi. Nepal's ambassador to India, Nilambar Acharya, hoped that the relations between the 2 countries would continue to grow and grow from height to height. grow in the future. He said that both countries share similar culture, traditions and values, which are an important aspect of the relationship between the two countries.
हम सभी को होली का मुबारक कहते हैं। ये संस्कृति जो है नेपाल और भारत को और संस्कृति ने भी जोड़ रखा है। हम लोग का बहुत नज़दीकी संबंध है। हम सब भारतीय मित्रों को अपना प्यार, अपना मित्रता, अपनी शुभकामनाएं देते हैं। सब अच्छा हो और नेपाल भारत का संबंध भी और आगे बढ़े, मजबूत बने। हम लोग बहुत नज़दीक के दोस्त हैं। हमारे उत्सव, चार, संस्कृति में बहुत सामिप्य है।
Well, a huge container ship that has been stuck across the Suez Canal for almost a week has been freed from the shoreline. The Ever Given giant container ship has been blocking one of the world's busiest trade routes, forcing companies to reroute ships and causing long tailbacks. So the reports have said that the ship had been freed, and that's raised hopes that traffic along the canal could resume within hours to move, clearing the way for an estimated $9.6 billion of goods that are being held up each day. The External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has landed in Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan, situated in Central Asia, where he will be attending the Heart of Asia conference. The External Affairs Minister also visited the Dushanbe Chotut Highway project site, and he lauded the good work done by the Border Roads Organization under India's grant assistance. The 8-lane highway will decongest Dushanbe. Well, the situation in Myanmar remains grim after the untold level of violence, claiming over 100 lives on Saturday. Thousands of people have fled to Thailand to escape the escalating violence there. India shares a 1,643-kilometer border with Myanmar. Part of that border is porous, especially in Mizoram, where, under a free movement regime, residents within 16 kilometers on either side are allowed to move freely between the two countries and can stay up to 14 days at a stretch. But because of COVID restrictions, this movement has been restricted. The tense situation in Myanmar continues as the military junta continues to violently suppress protesters. Many of them are fleeing for their lives, looking for refuge in neighboring India and Thailand. US President Joe Biden on Monday condemned reports that Myanmar's armed forces opened fire at a funeral near Yangon as people had gathered to mourn at least 114 people killed in the bloodiest crackdown on protests since the coup began. Witnesses say at least 6 children between the ages of 10 and 16 were among those killed on Saturday. Mourners at the Sunday funeral service of a 20-year-old student said they were forced to flee after being shot at.
It's terrible. It's absolutely outrageous. And based on the reporting I've gotten, an awful lot of people have been killed totally unnecessarily.
A UN special rapporteur for Myanmar said that the army was carrying out mass murder. He called for an isolation of the junta, cutting off its funding for oil and gas, as well as halting its access to weapons. Heavy fighting erupted between the army and some of 24 ethnic armed groups in Myanmar that control swathes of the country. Around 3,000 people fled to neighboring Thailand after junta jets bombed areas controlled by the Karen National Union militia near the border. Thailand is preparing for a potential flood of refugees.
Please, let this be an internal issue for us. We don't want to have an exodus of refugees and evacuation territory, but we will observe human rights too.
Since the military seized power in Myanmar on February 1st, hundreds of police too have fled to India. Some police personnel have said that they left Myanmar because they feared persecution after refusing to obey the junta's orders to shoot protesters. Myanmar's junta took power on February 1st, while elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi remains in detention at an undisclosed location. Foreign criticism and sanctions imposed by some Western nations have failed so far to sway military leaders. Hundreds of people have died in the ongoing protests since the coup began. With agency inputs, World Today Desk, DD India. Ambassador Rajiv Kumar Bhatia, former Indian ambassador to Myanmar, joins us now to put this into context. Thanks very much, Ambassador Bhatia. So how do you read the situation now? I mean, it's getting from bad to worse, it looks like, because the situation is getting grim.
Yes, I think
go ahead, sir.
that is an accurate description. I think the situation is already very grave. The Armed Forces Day turned out to be the bloodiest, most violent day. Over 100 people, probably 114 or more, lost their lives, many of them young children, and yet defying the armed forces. The next day again, people have come out to protest. So what exactly is going on? I think the military is under great pressure from the popular will, from the popular defiance of the military. On the other hand, people are sacrificing their lives. So this painful, tragic impasse is continuing, and this is definitely having an impact, immediate impact on the neighbors, including on India.
Indeed. So, well, the situation in India, of course, is a difficult one because, I mean, we share, what, a 1,600 plus kilometer border with Myanmar. Many parts of that border are porous, and there has been, because of the situation of COVID, there has to be restrictions because, I mean, anyway, foreigners are not really allowed into our country at this time. So in this situation, it is quite a difficult time, but people are wanting to flee and they are begging them, sir, people at the borders to let India people in and, politely being declined. That's the situation. How do you read this, sir?
This is, a real dilemma for India as a nation and India as a government. On the other one hand, we have the humanitarian angle to factor in. As you said, a large number of people are there. Many of them are security personnel who are fleeing, having refused to obey the orders of the authorities. On the other hand, as a responsible state, as a responsible, friendly neighbor, the government has to take into account the sensitivities of the authorities in Myanmar as well, because we have people in our own country very supportive of the people in Myanmar. The level of anguish and the level of concern have been rising in India. But on the other hand, the government has to be responsible and particularly concerned about protecting this country's interests as well. As you know, we have extensive interests in Myanmar. First of all, there has been a long history of friendly relations with the people and the government. Then we have vital economic stakes. We also have to worry about the adverse impact of the situation and instability in Myanmar on the peace and security in Northeast. And above all, there is the China factor, the larger geopolitical factor, the need for India to align itself somewhat or as much as possible with the position that has been developed within the Quad powers of US, India, Australia and Japan. So keeping all these factors into view, I think I can assure you that on the basis of my own research and knowledge, the government seems to be guided by three basic elements in its policy. First, it really wants to see the very early end of the suffering of the people of Myanmar. I think this is very significant. The second element undoubtedly is that the Indian government and the Indian people are fully supportive of the transition to democracy, for the restoration of democracy, and the end of this very painful situation created by the coup that was launched on 1st February. And the third element is very significant, which is that the feeling in Delhi is that the way to end this grave crisis in Myanmar is to actively start promoting reconciliation between the two sides, the military and the people who have launched the civil disobedience movement.
Right.
Now, the ideally placed institution for this is ASEAN. I think a great deal of support is coming for ASEAN, and this is the Indonesia-led initiative of ASEAN, which is trying to explore possibilities. And as soon as they have a reasonable level of support from both sides in Myanmar, they will move in. Information reaching Delhi is that Indonesian president has already spoken to the chair of ASEAN, Sultan of Brunei, and it is likely that an ASEAN summit exclusively on Myanmar may take place in early part of April.
Right.
So I think we have to focus our hopes on ASEAN and on diplomatic effort to promote reconciliation in Myanmar.
So the process would be to find reconciliation there rather than impose sanctions in Myanmar, which is what the Western powers seem to be doing. They don't that those sanctions are not likely to work. Would you say? Also, the fact that well, what the UN is asking is that all financial aid or whatever controls are coming in from the West in terms of Myanmar's oil supplies. That should be stopped. Also, their applications in the area of defense. I mean, their defense supplies, if that can be stopped. What do you think? I mean, can that actually just be done like that?
I have my doubts, and I share the skepticism which is steeped in your question. It is not any personal sentiment. One simply happens to be a keen student of history. One has watched very closely the history of this country on the last occasion when a similar and very grave crisis occurred in the 80s and early 90s. The point is that it's very easy for the Western world to talk in terms of condemnation, sanctions, and just rhetoric about human rights. The more challenging, the more difficult thing is to try to do things that help the people of Myanmar. If you do sanctions at a very large scale, the first party that would be affected adversely is the people of Myanmar. So we have to assist and help the people of Myanmar. We have to see that there is no large scale exodus of people outside. Already, I think Thailand is bracing for a large scale exodus. It could also happen on our side.
Right.
And the second point is that the parties concerned in Myanmar have to realize that this is an internal conflict which only can be resolved through dialogue. This is a war in which there will be no winners if dialogue is not given a full chance. And therefore, I think the feeling in Delhi would be that if ASEAN and Indonesia are so keen and enthusiastic about helping, then let us give them support and hope that a better day will descend on Myanmar.
So General Hlang is talked about at the Army Day function. He talked about elections and the return to democracy. But how serious do you think that is? Because when one tries to analyze the manner in which the military coup took place on the 1st of February, apparently analysts say that it was because he, as a person, he harbored political ambitions. And he was not happy just being the head of the military, and he was close to the end of his term. So it was really, I mean, some people say it's just a one-man situation. I mean, if he could be persuaded to move aside, things could return to normal.
Our assessment is that this is no longer about the presidential ambitions of Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing, or about Madame Aung San Suu Kyi, or about political parties such as NLD, etc. It is really fundamentally about a clash of two mindsets. The Myanmar military believes that it is the guardian of the state, power flows from it, and it can at best offer what it calls disciplined democracy, which is their way to say limited or partial democracy. On the other hand, the people today, by their actions for the last almost 7 weeks, have made it clear that they want full democracy. They want the army to be now under complete control of the government. They virtually want the army to go back to the barracks. Now, this conflict will have to be reconciled. I think each side will have to come down from their high hill in the larger interest of the nation, because if that does not happen, Myanmar can head towards being a failed state, which
Yes.
will create a massive problem for the people and the authorities and the region. So I think it is in our collective interest that the idea of compromise, of reconciliation, of dialogue is promoted.
In fact, I think you had joined us in a conversation when, Aung San Suu Kyi had come to power for the first time and saying that it was a new dawn and a new era, and you had looked forward to, a total change. But unfortunately, that hasn't lasted. So, I mean, what do you think were the drawbacks as a result of that? Because things seem to be moving smoothly in Myanmar until this coup.
You are absolutely right, and I appreciate the memory that you have just created. Indeed, 2010-11 represented a new dawn, and that new dawn actually lasted for 10 years. There were dark nights. For example, the conditions created which led to the exodus, forcible displacement of the 1 million Rohingyas from Myanmar. But overall, the system of partial democracy was working quite well. What happened then? What happened essentially was that Madame Aung San Suu Kyi, in the latest election held in November 2020, received a massive mandate which created a certain degree of insecurity on part of the military leadership. Besides, in retrospect, it comes out clearly that while the previous generation of generals, led by Senior General Than Shwe, was quite willing to have a politically balanced and compromised kind of situation in which power would be distributed between the civilian authority and the military authority, that kind of formula is no longer acceptable to the present generation of generals led by Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing. He has now his own idea. 10 years back, he was still junior in the political hierarchy. He is now number one, and he really wants to stay number one. But then I think military has to recognize that the country's mood has changed. The people are defiant, they are very courageous, and then they are using technology. The whole world knows every day, every hour what is happening in Myanmar. And therefore, to my mind, to a long-term student of Myanmar affairs,
Yes.
this has to end either now through compromise, or it has to end through compromise a few months later, but by then we would have lost unnecessarily many more lives, sadly.
Indeed. So would you think that this is a time when, when the international community gets involved, you say through ASEAN being the front runner or the, or the chief negotiator in a sense. So would they actually, be able to resolve the Rohingya issue as well? Because, that seemed to have been a festering issue even under the NLD government, even though it was a democracy. It didn't seem to be an issue that was going to be sorted out. But, as the geopolitics seems to have changed and the circumstances seem to have changed, could a future government be, in a position to accept the Rohingyas back?
Well, I think I would say that a sound, balanced government in Myanmar in future should accept that, as they had done in the past. Even the military governments in the past, when the Rohingya issue erupted back in the mid-70s and then in 80s, 90s, they stayed for a few months or a year or two in Bangladesh, and then most of them came back to Myanmar,
Yes.
recognizing that they are the people who belong to Myanmar. So yes, Rohingya issue would also have to be on the table, but I think one thing at a time. Right now, the fundamental issue is about the governance structure, about the vision, as I mentioned, and in terms of bringing the bloodshed to an end. I think Myanmar is now just about to celebrate their most important water festival, which is like our Holi in
Yes.
India.
Okay.
It's going to be a very sad water festival. There would be no festivity or joy. People have been killed.
Yes.
But let first the bloodshed come to an end. a political compromise be reached, and that's, yes, indeed, the Rohingya issue must be on the table. As you noted very briefly, when Prime Minister Modi was in Dhaka just 2 days back, this issue came up, and Bangladesh expressed its a strong hope that India will contribute further to this cause.
Indeed, when we, when we look at the current situation, you did mention that Myanmar could be in a situation where it could be a failed state, but already the fact that democracy has broken down and a military coup has taken place, the fact that the constitution does not have that kind of value anymore, perhaps they are looking for a new structure on which to reconstruct the state. Have we reached that stage? That means it's already a failed state. It's going to any form to bring Myanmar back into a stable government will be under a new a new regime, a new idea in a sense. Am I right in this reading?
Yes, you are right. There will have to be a new political arrangement.
Yes.
But the actors would be the same. You cannot write off the generals. You cannot write off NLD and Madame Aung San Suu Kyi, and you probably now will have to include some of the courageous, valiant new generation leaders who have been leading the civil disobedience movement. In terms of getting a new constitution, as you know very well from the example of many other countries, it is not easy to create a new constitution out of nothing.
Yes.
Therefore, it will have to be a step-by-step approach. There will need to be a dialogue which will have to be nurtured by the outsiders. And yes, you are right. The Western countries, the UN, the US, China, India, all of us will have to agree to support ASEAN's efforts. We cannot undercut them. We cannot run our own peace initiatives. We cannot keep passing resolutions in the Security Council and hope that the peace negotiators can create a deal. So let the international community understand what is going on. Let it give support to the powers of the region. Indonesia is the largest power. It is a country which saw a very successful transition from the military rule to full-fledged democracy.
Yes.
It will have to generate support from all countries of ASEAN, or at least silence of some of them which may be too close to the other side. And it will have to take Thailand with us, Thailand with it. Thailand is a major neighbor. The democracy movement people would have their own contacts and channels with the Thai government. And I think it is possible, it is doable, it is within the realm of diplomacy. It would be wonderful if Asian countries, India, Japan, China, start expressing their full-fledged support for ASEAN at this critical juncture.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rajesh Bhatia, for your inputs and helping us to understand the situation, putting it into context for us. Moving on then to our next story. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is, in a tweet in fact, he has informed that in an outreach exercise to the Indo-Pacific, the Made in India COVID vaccines have reached Fiji. And let's take a look now at updates on COVID-19 from across the world. Over 12 crore 78 lakh people worldwide have contracted the COVID-19 disease, while more than 10 crore 30 lakh have recovered from it. So far, the death toll from the virus stands above 27 lakh 97,000 globally. The US continues to remain the worst affected country from COVID-19. The number of cases has crossed 3 crore 9 lakhs. And the country has seen over 5 lakh 62,000 people who have died from the virus, followed by Brazil, where more than 3 lakh 12,000 lives have been lost because of COVID-19. The Australian authorities, they have announced a straight 3-day COVID-19 lockdown in Brisbane that starts from Monday afternoon, and the lockdown has been imposed. This is an attempt to stamp out the outbreak of the UK variant, which is quite virulent of this virus. Now, as of today, 7 cases of UK variant had been reported in Brisbane. The first case was in a new cluster, was reported on Friday. People will only be allowed to step out for essential work, healthcare, grocery shopping or exercise. The lockdown in Brisbane is currently scheduled to end just before Easter, the Easter long weekend, and the school term break in Australia, a popular time, in fact, for people to go traveling in that country.
We will have to go into a 3-day lockdown. This is the UK strain. It is highly infectious. Now, we need to do this now to avoid a longer lockdown, and that lockdown will commence at 5 p.m. this afternoon. This is essential, everyone, that we do this to stop further transmission. We've seen what's happened in other countries. I don't want to see that happen to Queensland. I don't want to see that happen to Australia. I know this is a really big call. I know it's very tough. We've got Easter coming up. We've got school holidays coming up. But let's do it now, and let's do it right, and let's see if we can come through at the other end. We'll also be reviewing it on Wednesday night as well. We'll know whether there's any further community transmission.
Well, France has been reporting more COVID-19 cases and deaths. To restrict the spread of the deadly virus 2 weeks ago, French authorities imposed a lockdown. In Paris, a night curfew is also in place. On Sunday, police patrolled along the banks of the river Seine in Paris, where spring temperatures attracted crowds there. So police reminded people of the restrictions that are in place, and people have been asked to maintain a physical distance, wearing a mask when outside, and they've also not been allowed to gather in groups which are larger than 6 people. But Britain is confident the second doses of COVID-19 vaccines will be administered on time without mixing jabs amid concerns over a slowdown in supplies. So the government warned earlier in the month that its vaccination program would slow down in April due in part to a delay of shipments. Meanwhile, the European Union has also threatened to block vaccine shipments to countries such as the UK with higher vaccination rates. The government has also been planning to offer 3.7 million jabs to EU member Ireland and partly to lift lockdown measures in Northern Ireland. News from Bangladesh. The government there has extended the closure of primary schools and kindergartens till May 22 to protect students from the infection. The students have been advised to stay at home and abide by health instructions issued by the government to contain the spread of the corona pandemic in the country. The Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina urged people to wear masks and maintain health guidelines in view of the fresh surge in corona cases. Sheikh Hasina said that schools, colleges and universities will reopen after Eid in view of a fresh surge in infections. Meanwhile, new infections continued to be over 3,500 for the 6th consecutive day on Sunday, with 3,908 cases reported in the last 24 hours. The mass vaccination program is continuing in Bangladesh, taking the total number of vaccinated people to over 52.63 lakh. News from Brazil. Well, Brazil has suspended the deadline for analyzing a request for the emergency use of Russia's Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine. Brazil's health minister said that the União Química, which will manufacture the shots, did not present the necessary documentation. So according to Brazil's health regulator, Anvisa, the deadline for analyzing the emergency use requests is either 7 or 30 business days. Brazil has approved other vaccines, and at least 6% of the population has received 1 dose. The National Stock Exchange of India and the Bombay Stock Exchange are closed today on account of Holi, but similarly the domestic bullion markets and the forex markets are also shut today. But elsewhere in Asia, stocks rose. Japan's Nikkei share average gained about 7.7% on optimism about domestic corporate earnings and an economic recovery in the US, but concerns about a potential $2 billion loss flagged by brokerage firm Nomura Holdings limited gains. China's blue chips rose by 0.8%. The MSCI's broadest index of the Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan added 0.3%. Meanwhile, news of the ship's movement immediately sent oil prices sharply lower. Global crude oil prices had slumped more than 2%. Brent crude oil was down $1.38 or 2.1% to $63.19 a barrel. U.S. crude oil $1.48 or 2.4% to $59.49 a barrel. As of now, hundreds of container ships, bulk carriers and oil-laden tankers were backed up at both ends of the Suez Canal. Of course, they've begun to move now, but oil prices had swung widely in the last few days because traders and investors were weighing the impact of the blockage of this key trade transit point and the broader effect that lockdowns to stop coronavirus infections were having on the world. Let's give you a roundup now of all the news that's happening across the world.
In Mozambique, dozens of people were killed in an attack last week on the northern Mozambique town of Palma. A Defense and Security Forces spokesman said that 7 people were killed when their convoy of cars was ambushed as they tried to escape. Hundreds of other people, both locals and foreigners, have been rescued from the town located near gas projects worth $60 billion. Major protests took place in cities across the United States over the distressing wave of violence against Asian people in the country, with many loudly calling for an end to anti-Asian hate crime. The coordinated series of nationwide events were held under the banner of Stop Anti-Asian Crime. Many protesters said that the spike in violence against Asian Americans is becoming unbearable. President Joe Biden has said that attacks on Asians must stop, but many in the Asian community hold former President Donald Trump responsible for soul divisions. In Canada's Toronto, hundreds of members of Asian community and their allies held a rally at the city's Nathan Phillips Square to protest against the rise in anti-Asian racism and attacks in Canada. The protests were held in the wake of a mass shooting in neighboring United States where most of the victims were of Asian descent. The rally saw dozens of speakers and performers grace the stage in an effort to raise awareness on the issue. Family and friends of George Floyd gathered for a vigil in Minneapolis a day before the trial begins for Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer charged in the death of Floyd. 45-year-old Chauvin has pleaded not guilty to charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter, saying he was following police training during the deadly arrest of Floyd on May 25th last year on suspicion of passing a fake $20 bill. A bystander's video showed Chauvin with his knee on the neck of 46-year-old Floyd, who begged for his life during the arrest. Hundreds of Cubans took to Havana's famous seaside drive in a colorful caravan of cars, motorcycles and bicycles to demand the United States lift its 60-year-old embargo on the Caribbean island nation. The tightening of the trade embargo under Trump has worsened food and medicine shortages. Former US President Donald Trump administration took more than 200 initiatives to tighten the decades-old trade embargo on Cuba over 4 years. A massive fire broke out at an Indonesian state oil company, Pertamina's refinery on Monday, injuring 5 and leading to the evacuation of almost 950 residents nearby. Videos shared on social media showed a large explosion engulfing the refinery's storage tanks. The refinery said there had been no impact on the processing plant and it hopes to restore operations in 4 or 5 days. The fire started just after midnight during bad weather, although the cause was currently unknown, the oil refinery said in a statement. A dispute over control of drug trafficking between the Venezuelan military and illegal armed groups is behind the violence, causing thousands of people to flee to Colombia, Colombian Defense Minister Diego Molano has said. The flow of refugees began a week ago after Venezuela National Bolivarian Armed Forces launched an offensive against armed groups in Venezuela's La Victoria. In 2016, Colombia signed a peace deal with the new Demobilized Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, ending the group's part in the country's more than 50-year-old conflict, which left 260,000 dead and millions displaced. A strong thunderstorm caused a power blackout on the Portuguese island of Madeira. Video footage captured an intense electrical storm with lightning in the sky. According to eyewitnesses, residents did not have power and street lighting for 3 hours. A lightning strike also affected mobile and internet connections, with no access to networks for around an hour. Local media reported the intensity of the storm brought down the power grid on the island. Spanish Coast Guards picked up 58 migrants from the sea to the northeast of Gran Canaria. The 56 men and 2 women were brought after the vessel was located by a Coast Guard helicopter. Over the last 24-hour period, more than 300 migrants adrift in 7 dinghies have been rescued off the Canary Islands. According to UNHCR, hundreds died or went missing last year after attempting the crossing to the Spanish islands in the Atlantic Ocean. 1 person died and multiple others were wounded in a stabbing at a public library in an affluent Vancouver suburb, and a suspect who apparently acted alone was taken into custody. Canada's Global News reported 1 death, citing police. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said multiple victims were stabbed inside and outside the North Vancouver library and that 1 suspect was in custody. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, after news at a glance, here's your daily fix of offbeat, funny and unique stories in our segment, which is Beyond the Headlines.
Thousands of worshippers in Iraqi town of Baghdida in the Christian district of Hamdania celebrated Palm Sunday. A procession led by priests toured Baghdida with children and adults alike celebrating, chanting and marching to mark the occasion as some wore face masks. Nearly 25,000 people participated in the celebrations. The Catholic community in Berlin celebrated pre-Easter Palm Sunday with a church service on Sunday under corona conditions. The visitors to the St. Bonifacius church had to register themselves in contact list before the service and keep the mask and distance required during the service. Pastor Oliver Cornelius expressed concern that due to the steadily increasing number of infections, attendance at church services would soon no longer be possible. In scenes very different from last year, Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre opened to the public on Palm Sunday, allowing Christians to attend Mass at the start of Holy Week on the site where they believe Jesus was crucified and rose from the dead. The mood was celebrated as scores of Roman Catholics passed through the wooden doors of the church that is the global focus of the most important festival in the Christian calendar. More than half of the population of Israel having received 2 vaccine doses, coronavirus restrictions were eased to allow small congregations to gather with social distancing measures in place. Palm Sunday commemorates the day the Gospels say Jesus rode into Jerusalem and was hailed by the people, only to be crucified 5 days later. India celebrated Festival of Colors today. People in most parts of the country smeared each other with colors as they celebrated the festival. Prayers being offered at Mahakaleshwar temple in Ujjain on the occasion of Holi today, while devotees stood in queue to get a glimpse of the deity. People in Punjab's Amritsar also celebrated Holi with full enthusiasm. Celebrated at the onset of spring, Holi holds a mythological importance, that of the triumph of good over evil. It is also associated with the eternal love of Hindu Lord Krishna and Radha and a riot of colors. The SCEAG coal-fired power plant in Germany's Leunen was successfully blown up on Sunday. A total of 3 buildings of the decommissioned power plant with the high Stornstein and cooling tower were razed to the ground in the morning. The area around the power plant had previously been cordoned off on a large scale. In Spain's Barcelona, around 5,000 music fans attended the sold-out concert for Spanish indie band Love of Lesbian after taking rapid COVID-19 test. The test spared them from maintaining social distancing. However, attendees had to wear face masks throughout the concert in the Palau Sant Jordi Arena. Pre-concert testing was offered at 3 locations in the city and carried out by 80 nurses wearing full personal protective equipment. Some winced as nurses swabbed their noses. Thousands of islanders are flocking to see a volcano which is continuing to spew lava since it started to erupt more than a week ago. Since the eruption on March 19th, tourists, scientists and photographers have hiked to the site on Reykjanes Peninsula, some 30 kilometers southwest of the capital, to be awed by the rare lava fountains. The volcano has become a welcome distraction from the COVID pandemic for many, and some have visited it several times. To cope with the flood of visitors, authorities have set up a 3.5-kilometer hiking trail to the eruption site and are patrolling the area to prevent onlookers from going into the hazardous areas polluted by volcano gases. The famous pink cherry trees of Washington DC are getting closer to blossoming each day, with warm weather speeding things along. Hitting what is known as peduncle elongation phase, the flowers were sitting to emerge as visitors to the tidal basin marveled at the buds. Encouraging people to enjoy the cherry blossom experience virtually, the Park Service said public access could remain open if enough people stayed home. A few residents decided to try and enjoy the cherry blossoms early, visiting when only a few trees had full flowers. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, let's turn the pages of history and see what major events took place on this day in our segment, Today in History.
On this day in 1961, Nelson Mandela, along with several others, were acquitted after a 4.5-year trial. Mandela and scores of other people were charged with high treason. Mandela and the last 27 remaining accused were acquitted of the charges, after which he went underground. On March 29th in 1968, a U.S. court-martial at Fort Benning in Georgia found Lieutenant William L. Calley guilty of premeditated murder at My Lai. It was found that Calley, a platoon leader, had led his men in a massacre of Vietnamese civilians, including women and children, at a cluster of hamlets in Quang Ngai province on March 16th in 1968. Calley was found guilty of 6 specifications of premeditated murder. It was on March 29th in the year 1974 when the NASA's unmanned United States space probe Mariner 10 became the first spacecraft to visit planet Mercury. The spacecraft, which was launched by NASA in November 1973, sent back close-up images of the celestial body, which was usually obscured due to its proximity to the Sun. On March 29th in 1998, Annie Friesinger beat Anna Marie Thomas of the Netherlands to break the world record in the 1500-meter race at a World Speed Skating Single Distance Championships in Calgary. Friesinger broke the world record in a time of 1 minute 56 seconds and 95 nanoseconds. It was on March 29th in 2017 when the United Kingdom invoked Article 50 of the Treaty on European Union, beginning its withdrawal from the European Union, commonly known as Brexit. World Today Desk, DD India.
Billy Horschel beat his fellow American Scotty Scheffler 2-1 to win the WGC match play title in Austin, Texas. Scheffler won the title whole, but Horschel chipped in to win the 5th and was 2 ahead by the 9th. An increasingly scrappy match saw 8 holes on the back, 9 halved, with Horschel parring in 17th to win. The Europe Ryder Cup hopeful Victor Perez, beaten by Horschel in the semi-finals, was defeated 2-1 by Matt Kuchar in the match to decide who finished 3rd. American Kuchar, winner of the event in 2013 and runner-up in 2019, won 4 holes out of 5 from the 8 to go 4 up, but Perez hit back to win the next 2 with birdies. However, the match ended on the 17th when Perez was unable to hole a 25-foot birdie putt after Kuchar was in for a par. Neil Robertson claimed the Tour Championship with a 10-4 win over Ronnie O'Sullivan, suffered his 5th ranking final defeat of the season. The Australian hit 5 century breaks in the final and won 6 consecutive frames in Sunday evening's session. It was a 20th ranking title triumph for the UK Championship winner. O'Sullivan had also been beaten in the Northern Ireland Open, Scottish Open, Welsh Open and Players' Championship finals. Robertson now hopes he can regain the world title he won 11 years ago and will start as one of the favourites at the Crucible next month. England were beaten in a thrilling one-day series decider against India despite Sam Curran's heroic 95 not out. Chasing 330 runs, England looked beaten at 200 for 7 in the 31st over, only for Curran to keep them afloat by adding 57 runs with Adil Rashid and then 60 runs with Mark Wood. In 7 previous one-day internationals, Karan's highest score was just 15. He was calculated, composed and brave in playing one of the great lower order knocks that the game has seen, carrying England to the verge of a first ODI series victory in India for 36 years, but he fell short, so India won. Spain striker Dani Olmo snatched a 2-1 win. This is away to Georgia in the World Cup qualifier on Sunday with a stoppage time strike from outside the area to kickstart his side's efforts to qualify for Qatar 2022. This is after a sluggish start. Georgia, ranked 89th in the world, 83 places below Spain, thrilled the 15,000 fans at the Boris Pajazde Dynamo Arena when 20-year-old winger Kwicha Kwasheklia fired them ahead 2 minutes before half-time after they coasted past the defence. Spain were on course for their first defeat in a World Cup qualifier in 28 years until Ferran Torres levelled in the 56th, sliding in to send in a Jordi Alba cross into the roof of the net after Alvaro Morata had failed to connect with the ball. Luis Enrique's side, they pressed for a winner right until the end and finally found one when Olmo let fly from long range, and although the goalkeeper Giorgio Loria got a hand to the shot, it dropped just under the crossbar and into the net. Harry Kane's outstanding header helped England beat Albania 2-1, I beg your pardon, 2-0 in fact, to continue their 100% winning start. This is to the World Cup 2022 qualifying campaign, and Gareth Southgate's side, they had been tepid before Kane produced a rare moment to qualify of quality to direct Luke Shaw's cross into the far corner of the net. Kane hit the bar from close range before Etrit Berisha denied Phil Foden by pushing his shot onto the post. Mason Mount doubled the lead with a composed finish after a pass by Kane. Ousmane Dembele inspired France to a 2-0 victory over Kazakhstan in their second World Cup qualifier to mark a successful return to the World Championships team. 4 days after being held 1-1 by Ukraine at the Stade de France, the French beat their, in fact, they built their win in the first half with Sergei Mali's own goal adding to Dembele's opener before Mbappe missed a second half penalty, and France moved top of Group D with 4 points ahead of Bosnia, who they face away on Wednesday, Ukraine and Finland. Lewis Hamilton's quest for an 8th world title got off to a perfect start, and he held off Max Verstappen's late charge to win a scintillating Bahrain Grand Prix in fabulous style. Verstappen actually took the lead from Hamilton with 4 laps to go, but handed the position back because he had overtaken by running off the track. The move cost the Red Bull driver the victory. Verstappen never quite got enough back. He was not close enough again to challenge Hamilton, and it was a remarkable climax to a tense and thrilling strategic battle that bodes well for an epic season between these two men. Mercedes's Valtteri Bottas finished third. Well, several hundred Jewish worshippers wearing face masks, they prayed at the Western Wall on Monday. This is at a special priestly blessing during the holiday of the Passover, an event which is usually attended by thousands. The prayer, which took place under COVID-19 restrictions, was split into 2 separate events this year to allow for more people to attend. The plaza itself was divided into prayer capsules. Last year, only 10 worshippers were allowed to attend the Passover blessing under strict coronavirus restrictions and social distancing rules, so it was little better than last year. It's usually attended by hundreds of people. Well, on that note, we conclude World Today for today. Thanks very much for being with us. Namaskar.